every year, Variety, and I edit this section, which is such a joy. We put together a wonderful group of 10 breakout screenwriters that are going to hit big and have giant careers. So this year we've assembled quite a group, and we have 6 of them. We do 10, but we have 6 that were able to travel here today, which is amazing. So I want to first invite up Zach BAYLIN, who King Richard is his film. King Richard is, like, I love this movie so much, so welcome. Thanks for coming here. CAMILLA BLACKETT, she's got Queen coming up. We have Julia Cox, who's got an amazing project about Diana Nyad, swimmer, she's coming up.
Shuffling behind me.
Jeremy O'Harris, who wrote Zola, which I loved. Jessica KNOLL, who not only is a best-selling author, but a screenwriter as well. She's over here. And Randy McKinnon, who's got Notes from a Young Black Chef coming up and is also an amazing writer. These guys are all great, so thank you. So yeah, this is our Variety class of 2021, whatever year we're in. I've lost track. Our screenwriters to watch. Thank you guys so much for being here. A lot of us met last night. A few of us didn't. But what an incredible year for screenwriters. You know, I have to say, every year we always hear, wow, this is such a great group you've assembled. But in all honesty, this year, I think we really hit the jackpot because so many people have, more than ever, have said, wow, this is like an incredible group of young, talented writers that you've put together and filmmakers. So I think this year is particularly incredible. So I'm really excited for all of your careers. So I guess, you know, we'll just, you know, Randy, let's start with Randy since you're closest to me. Randy's got an amazing story. He was on a path to become a professional football player. And while I don't know that much about soccer, I probably actually know more about football. I mean, yeah, right, like American football, whatever.
This is actually football.
It's the brown ball and it's shaped, it's like, you know, it's like a football, it's like oval. And last night we had this, you know, we were talking, I was so interested, I said, you know, when you think about it, being an athlete and being a writer, they both require stamina, they require discipline. You have to be dedicated to your craft. And you had some great insights about that. I'd love to kind of talk to you about how, you know, having that experience as a football player on that path, and then you woke up one day and you realize, you know what, this is not what I want to do with my life. I want to write. And yet you still apply that discipline to the act of writing. So talk to us a little bit about that.
So I think what was so interesting about, you know, playing sports, as many who know, it's such a collaborative, you know, type of environment. You see it as like teamwork, right? You hear it all the time. And when you get into filmmaking, you start to realize the same thing, right? It's such a major collaborative process. And I think when I first came in, I was out of the industry. I had no connections into it. So I was the person that came in was like, okay, Googling how to write a screenplay, right? So it was like I was coming from that level of knowledge of the industry other than just my love of film. But what I started to realize was that a lot of the things that I did from sports, you know, and playing football translated so well. I remember the first writing job that I got, I was staffed on this Netflix project, and I remember walking in, and the way that I pitched myself to all the producers, I broke down a football team and how a writer's room looks exactly like a football team and how I would fit into it. Like, you know what I mean? Because I understood from the showrunner, from being, you know, the head coach. And so I literally started breaking down the exact way that it could translate and how each episode is like a new game. It's the same players with different strategy, you know, for what you have to accomplish. And I started to realize that, oh, wow, this is really translating. And I realized even from a discipline standpoint, you know, I always had 5 a.m. workouts since I was 16 my entire life. So I just do it now. So like now I just write from the morning. I started to realize, oh, I'm getting a lot done because I'm not getting crazy emails. I'm not, you know, I'm just so, I started to realize that those things, the discipline started to really pay forward, I guess, in the career switch.
I guess, and we also spoke briefly about like meditation, and just how important that is to your process as a writer. I'd love to ask you to kind of recap a little bit why that's important, and then I'd love to hear from the rest of you too, like if you meditate or what you do to kind of keep still and focus, because focus in writing is absolutely essential.
Yeah, I'll be fast, but like I think meditation for me just came from like desperation of like anxiety I was getting from so many like crazy notes, and just like a lot of, it was, you start to like, it's such a, you have so many internal dialogues, like, and when you're working on projects you don't realize how much you're really carrying in your mind, and and meditation was something that I didn't do, for the longest. And playing sports, you actually taught almost the opposite, where it's like, you have to just keep everything in, ball it in. And then in this industry, it's like, no, you need to express, you need to dig deep. So I was like, okay, well, like this is an experience. But I realized that meditation, like sound baths, if anyone's ever did a sound bath on the beach, it's like, I can't like express how much open, like just in life in general, whether you're a writer or not. I just started to realize that like, meditation was really essential in grounding myself, which I think you have to be within every project, every day, honestly. So it was big for me.
Does anyone else do anything like that, meditation or yoga, or just what do you do to kind of get in the moment in order to focus on the writing?
I do not meditate. I've tried. I think the times that I'm in the moment when I'm writing, I try to enjoy those moments because they're few and far between, and the moments where it's really, really hard and I have to reward myself for every sentence that I write by seeing what's on sale at Shop Bop and like what the recaps are on New York Mag this morning. I try not to judge that. I'm like, I've written 2 books that way. I've written a couple screenplays that way. Like, that's part of my process. And eventually, once I get deep enough into a project, I become so connected to it that I do find that flow, and it's easier to just like really sink down into that. But in the beginning of a project, it takes a long time to get to that point. So it's like pretty stop and go for me most of the time, and I just try not to judge that part of my process.
Yeah. No, I mean that's absolutely key. I want to go to Zach so we can start at go to both ends and then work our way to the middle. Zach, your movie King Richard, which I saw a couple of weeks ago, and it tells the story of Serena and Venus Williams, but how their father Richard really was just an indefatigable source of optimism and strength and support after being told no again and again and again and again. And I just thought that was really beautiful, more than a story about athleticism, which clearly the Williams sisters have in spades. This was a story about not taking no for an answer. And is that what inspired you when you were writing this film? And if not, what, were you a giant tennis fan before? I'm curious to see what your, I mean, you were writing a real life story about 2 of the most famous women athletes in the world.
Yeah, so I am a huge tennis fan, actually. And to answer that other question, actually, if I don't meditate, I want to meditate, but I like run and I play tennis a lot. So I try to, like, if I'm blocked or if I just like need some kind of reward, that's what I'll try to do, actually. But yeah, I mean, I think I was drawn to the story for a lot of reasons. One, just I knew it, and I was, I'd been following their careers for a really long time. I had a young daughter. My daughter was like 4 at the time I like started writing the script. So I was really interested in trying to write something about parenting, and my daughter is not going to be at Wimbledon, unfortunately. But I like that. I don't know how well you all know Richard's story, but basically, like he decided and planned for his daughters to be tennis players before they were born. And he had seen a tennis match on TV and said, if I had kids, they could do this. And he had never played tennis before. He had never like picked up a racket. and just the improbability of that, and not just that it was, you know, a monetary dream, but it was so tied to like his desire to be respected in the world and to lift his family up, and that just, when I was researching and found out all that, it was so inspiring, and I don't know, just like it was so improbable that it actually happened. So it was one of those rare times where you actually like hear or see an idea, and it was all there right from the beginning.
Yeah. I mean, I think what also is, I mean, I'm a huge tennis fan as well, and I played varsity tennis in high school, but obviously I didn't go to Wimbledon either. But
What's your rating?
yeah. But I think like one of the, you know, wonderful lessons of that movie is that no matter how many times you're told no, if there's something you really want badly enough, you can achieve that yes. And I think in terms of the business too, that's a really important lesson, because this is not an easy business. So I think is Camilla. Yeah, Camilla's next to you. I'd love to just, in terms of, were you ever told no? How did you turn it into a yes when it comes to your career?
Well, I think the entire experience of being a screenwriter is consistently being told no. That's the whole thing. And even when you have those moments of success where, like, you sell something, like, you turn in your first draft and the first round of notes is, no, you've done this wrong. Yeah. Let's start again. I think that, look, persistence is, it's the only way to continue doing this. It's just like this absolute insane belief that, this story that you've made up in your head should be seen, and that you are the person to tell it, and that other people will care about it, and that you just have to believe in the yes. You just can't listen to the no. You just have to keep going, and that's basically it.
Yeah. You come from a TV background. You were writing in Skins, the British version. Which is the better, which is the version.
The only version.
It's the only version. It's the only version.
Sorry, MTV.
Sorry, but it is. It's so great, and I love that show. It's so flippin' good.
Thank you.
And then there was Fresh Off the Boat, and there's TV shows in the United States, and then you kind of from that segue over to film. This is such a, not to reduce it to like black and white, but like, is there a format you enjoy more? Features versus TV? You like doing both? If you had to choose which one, they both kind of feed each other.
Yeah. I've never I think that the formats are just so flexible now, in that, TV was like my first ever, like, that was the first thing that anyone ever paid me to do. I was like 18 years old, and it was like, come and write on this TV show, and it was such a bizarre experience because it was a room full of teenagers. Yeah. We had.
But how did that happen? I'm curious, because I don't know, like, how at 18 do you get staffed on a show?
So I was doing my A-levels in Bristol, and I was in the same English class as Jamie Britton, who's still one of my best friends, and his father, Brian Elsley, who was a TV writer. Basically, he and Jamie and like kind of had this idea of like wanting to do this show about our A-levels in Bristol. Yeah. And Jamie's father used to read some music reviews that I used to write in this local Bristol magazine. They paid me in concert tickets, which was my dream.
Oh yeah, totally.
It was ideal.
That's the great perk of whatever we're doing here,
yeah.
Like the concert tickets.
Exactly. And so when Channel 4 commissioned commissioned Skins and said go and assemble a writers' room. It's actually quite rare for England. Like at that time, I think we were one of the first shows to ever do a writers' room. Brian asked me to, like, he read my reviews and he was like, can you just write a short script and just tell me if you're a writer. And I remember buying a copy of Fight Club just so I knew what a screenplay looked like. And I remember writing this little short in Word, because I didn't realize that Final Draft existed. So I was doing all the formatting. It took me so long, like so long. And then sent it to him, and then he was like, yeah, great, come and like be on this show. And so, yeah, which is a ridiculous way to get started, and it's definitely not that easy usually. I was incredibly lucky, and also just like the alchemy of Skins was it was utterly unique. It was just like the first show where they were like, no, we're doing a teen show and we only want teenagers to be writing on it. Yeah. The only people in that room who were like over the age of like 18 were Brian and Jack Thorne. Everyone else was an actual child. And that was definitely reflected in the way that the writer's room was.
That's really cool. Do you know Emma Forrest by any chance?
No.
She's another British writer who got her start as a teenager. You should read her stuff. I'll connect you.
Okay,
You guys would
great.
like each other.
I love that, yeah.
So Julia, who has this movie coming out about Diana Nyad, I don't even think subconsciously we realized there was such like an athlete theme kind of going on when I put this list together. But there is,
Right.
From tennis, ex-football players, and swimmers. And what's really, the movie is not out yet, so no one's, it's still in post-production, right?
No,
Or
it's in pre-production.
it's in pre-production, okay.
Yeah,
So we're not even in post, so it's in pre-production.
Hopefully we'll go in January.
Annette Bening is set to play Diana. And as we know about Diana Nyad, she swims long distances. But what I read this one really interesting thing. I think it might have actually been a quote that you gave for the writer who wrote your profile, was about very rarely do we see a movie about two women of a certain age. Right. Because when you're with a woman such as Diana Nyad, who's like, I'm gonna get in the ocean and I'm gonna swim from Florida to Cuba, or where, you know what I mean? Like, who's gonna? It's crazy, right? It's like you're seeing someone literally risk their life,
Yeah.
And I really liked that you said that, because it is so rare that we see a friendship or relationship between women of a certain age. How inspiring was that for you to be able to write a script about a woman who's not 20, who's not 40, who is older and one of the greatest athletes of our time? And we briefly mentioned, we both have seen, I saw her practice at the Rose Bowl, right. and you had two, or you hadn't?
I hadn't. I
Yeah.
was aware of her story. I'd read the New Yorker piece about her years ago when she successfully swam from Cuba to Florida after trying 5 times in her life, starting when she was 28. And then she quit swimming for 30 years and began trying again when she was 60 and finally made it when she was 64. So I'd read about her when she made it, and I was like, wow, someone will make that movie. And it's a crazy story and an extreme and fascinating and bizarre kind of sport, because it's so solitary. And the relationship you're referring to is the one with her trainer, Bonnie Stoll, who's also her best friend. So also like a jock, a former pro racquetball player, and Diana's best buddy, who came along with her on this crazy journey to try and try again and try again and try again and finally make it. And these two are just the funniest pair, best friends, peas in a pod, very different. Diana's definitely the alpha, and Bonnie is the sort of cool, wry, grounded, calm to Diana's like effervescent and larger than life personality. And that was really my way in. Yeah. I got the script as a rewrite, so there was a lot to think about and look at, and there was so much written about Diana, and she'd written a memoir, and there was a documentary, much to go off of. But for me, what was really fascinating was this relationship story and this sort of platonic love story, this friendship story, that because their friendship in the film is tested by the fact that Diana has this incredibly intense dream that could cost her life. And she's asking the person who loves her more than anyone else in the world, come along with me, come along again. I might not make it, but I have to do this. And I'm just fascinated by people who have that kind of drive about anything. I think you do see it in athletes, and you see it in all kinds of people, but that sort of very specific idea of what a meaningful life looks like to her, like being able to conquer this thing, to pull this off, that it just had to be done. And she wasn't going to stop until she did it. And she did it.
Yeah. I think what's so interesting too is literally when you're the ocean, you don't know what's beneath you. And there's the idea of the unknown, which is very much like the film business too.
Right.
You know, I want to just quickly too. Do No Harm is another. That was a spec script that was blacklisted, kind of.
It was blacklisted.
It was on the blacklist. Sorry,
It
it was blacklisted as a communist propaganda piece. No, it was on the blacklist. Sorry, everyone knows what the blacklist is. We just say that at work as a joke, and I forgot it doesn't necessarily translate. But yeah, but that was a script that kind of languished about and now has restored life to it. And tell us what's happening with it. It's been resurrected.
It was a spec I wrote in between TV jobs. I wanted to write something dark, and I wanted to just do something that was all mine. And it was on the blacklist, and we sold it to Paramount. And then I did a bazillion studio rewrites for Paramount. You know, the version that I'd written on spec was sort of the smaller, probably a little more cerebral, for better or worse, version. And it was like, kind of crank up the volume on the thriller, make the third act bigger, go in the studio movie direction. And then there was a draft where it was like, bring down the budget drastically. And there was a draft like, set it in the summer, and this skiing sequence that's kind of the thing about Act 3. Could it be a hike?
Water skiing.
And you just have to figure it out, especially,
Okay.
I mean, you're so happy to be working, and this was a few years ago, and excited that there's any version of this that could work, and maybe there's a lot of ways to do something right, and so you try to be nimble and figure it out, and then we survived one regime change at Paramount and didn't survive the next, and so it went to turnaround. For a while, and then Netflix bought it. Our original producers stayed on, new producers came on, got it to Netflix, and now we have an awesome director, and we've got more exciting updates to come on that. But yeah, Larissa Kondraki's directing, and she's fabulous.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's exciting. So,
Yes.
Jeremy, I mean, you know, a little bit like your film Zola. You're a playwright, and you wrote this film Zola. And talk about adapting material. This was a movie based on tweets. Then it became an article, and then it became a movie. Talk about low budget, shoestring budget here. I read a really interesting review. I don't remember if it was in Variety or Deadline, but it was something like Zola ignores all the rules of story and plot and filmmaking, and that's why it works. I don't know, like, what brought you to the project? And because I loved this movie, and we were talking about Riley Keough, and she's just fantastic. Everyone's so good, but yeah, it's not the traditional like structure of a film, which is why it's so great. So tell us a little bit about how do you adapt an article. Did you work off mostly the article or the tweets or both?
No, I worked off of her tweets.
You worked off the tweets.
I mean, like, David's amazing, and he gave us a lot of resources that really helped like flesh it out. But like, I want to be very clear. This is a movie where we adapted someone who I consider like a Homer of our time, right? Like, you know, I think it's very easy to discount like the sort of like intellect of a 21-year-old black girl who like worked at Hooters and was a stripper, which was often the case, and like why, like, you know, the thing that got bought was an article in Rolling Stone and not her tweets. Yeah. But like for Janixa and I, as we like started endeavoring this project, it became like very important to us to treat her words like the Bible, like you know, I in my pitch for like to the producers about why I should write it, I was like, listen guys, like, you know, I don't know who here has read like Zola or has read Ibsen or Chekhov, but I have, and I can't tell the difference in her like use of like classic Aristotelian like story structures of reversals and you know, moments of recognition from this and like a piece of Shakespeare. So I want to treat it like that, and everyone I think got really excited that like, because they hadn't felt like that. They were like, oh, that's weird. And I was like, well, there's like, you know, a lot of people wrote Twitter threads before Asia did, and she's the only one that we remember, right? Like, think of how many Twitter threads you've like went through, but like people literally have come up to me and been like, I remember that part where she said that I haven't stopped thinking about this line since 2015, and like that was crazy. So the way I got it, and you know what was so crazy is that all of us went out last night and we had like a lot of drinks and stayed up all night at the Marriott just like talking about our careers, and what's kind of I think the same with all of us, and one of the reasons why this group I think is really special is that all of us did come to this from weird angles struggles, and a lot of it was about like good relationships, strong relationships, and like really like this internal belief that like even if like it didn't look right or feel right to other people, like we were doing the right thing. Like I love Jessica's thing about like book writers writing their own adaptations, and yeah, she'll talk about it, but it's great. Anyway, I met Janixa when I was in LA, telling everyone that I was a writer, but never showing anyone anything because I hadn't written anything. But I had come here as an actor, and I didn't. I started going out for all these roles, and I hated everything I was going out for because no one knew how to write for like a 6'5" black gay man. In anything that wasn't like, you can be Greta Gerwig's friend from Wesleyan, and you'll have 3 lines. And I don't know that that's my journey. I was doing Shakespeare in Chicago, like what? And so I quit, and I'd written a play in college that everyone had really liked while I was in the acting program. So I just started telling people I was a playwright, because like no one will ask you to read a play if you tell them you're a playwright. They're just like, oh, that's so cute for you. And then it was a thing where like I would tell people like, what plays are you writing? And I'd write these plays in my head and tell people about these plays. And at one point, one of my friends was like, you got to just write a fucking play. So that's when I wrote my first play, and then it did really well. Anyway, the thing was, Janixa and I met at a party when I was on a really bad date. It was a party where a lot of white people were saying the N-word to a song, and I was like, this is crazy. The racial reckoning hadn't happened yet, so people didn't know they couldn't. So I went upstairs, and I heard black laughter, and I was like, safety. And I went to her, and she was like, oh my God. And I was like, I'm so obsessed with you. Like, you're so funny. And I was like, what do you do? Because she looked like some like stunning like artist, like a sculptor or something. And she was like, I make films. I was like, oh, what kind of films did you make? Like, maybe I've seen one, because I was a film critic at the time. And she was like, oh, I only do short films. And the weird thing was, my beat was short films. And I was like, I've probably seen your film. What was it? She's like, it was a movie. Michael Cera was in it. I was like, wait, did you make Gregory Go Boom? And she was like, yeah. I was like, that was my favorite movie. I thought a white Polish woman had made that, because your name is Janixa Bravo. And she was like, nope, it was me. And I fangirled like crazy and freaked her out. And she's like, I don't want to talk to this person ever again. But we became friends on Facebook, and I started messaging her, and then we were really close. And when she got offered Zola, she was also offered another movie, and it was becoming very difficult for her. And we've been very open about this, that I told her as a friend, I was like, listen, you're too special to waste your time working inside of structures where like people, you have to prove that you deserve this movie. Like, you don't need that. Go to this other thing that's easy, because you're great. Like, and I just don't want you to have to fight those fights. And she was like, but Jeremy, if I'm not fighting these fights, like, who's gonna fight them for Asia if I'm not doing it? I was like, you're right. So then she went and did it. And then she was looking for a screenwriter for it, and we were talking about it. And even though I had been the person to tell her she shouldn't take this job, she was like, I wish you could do this, but you're in grad school. And I was like, I know, I wish I could do it too. And she was like, you're the right person. You know all the things. You know all this. I was like, I know. And I love the story. I like read it the same day. I was like, I've dreamed of writing a screenplay forever, but I'm in grad school. And then her partner at the time was like, but what does that have to do with anything? Don't you have a summer break? And I was like, oh. And so then she said, if you finish all your homework, you can do it. And then I got Zola.
It's amazing.
I know. Seriously.
Did anyone record that? It was really funny. Is this being recorded? Honest to God, it is being recorded. Okay, that's great. So I forget my next question. I guess just about, I think, it was a response to, first of all, I want to thank you publicly for you changed your Twitter name to like Variety 10 Screenwriter Watch.
Well, it was cool. Right before that, it was, so the progression of my Twitter name was when the Tony nominations came out, I jokingly put like most Tony nominated playwright or something like that, because someone had said something nasty, or I said most Tony nominated flop or something like that. And then like after I lost all 12 Tonys, I was like most Tony snubbed person, because like our play has lost the most Tonys of any play of all time.
Daddy or
no, Slave Play?
Slave Play. Okay.
I lost the most Tonys of all time, which is chic.
That's amazing.
So I had that, and then I was like, this is kind of depressing. And the day after the Tonys, this came out, and I was like, actually, this is really chic. I'm over theater. I'm a screenwriter now.
Yeah. And then I think you tweeted something. Was it about Adele the other day? Something about wanting to get tickets? Or?
No. So Adele came to see Daddy, and very famously, you read the Twitter thread. I need people to retweet it, retweet it, because I need Adele to come. But Adele. Like on a sold out show day, asked for 6 tickets to see my play, and everyone was like, what the fuck? And like they did all this magic, made 6 tickets show up. All of our cast was freaking out because Adele was gonna come see the play. Her security came an hour before, cleared the theater, like found the entrance, like we're all like, Adele is here. Adele is here. And me and my director show up. Like, we never showed up randomly on a Wednesday, but we showed up and we were like, let's act cool. We're gonna sit in the backstage and then we'll just be like, oh, I wrote it, I directed it. Like, hi. And then we'll get our picture. It'll be great. Because this was also the week where she was like out with Jennifer Lawrence like every night. Like when she was like getting wasted and going to gay clubs, and we were like, oh, this is the best time to be her friend. And so we get the usher's like telling us everything. He's like, she just arrived. She's coming up the stairs. She's sitting down. She's asking her security guard to get her water. She's asking for a program. Wait a second, hold on. She's asking how long it is. She's saying she feels sick. Oh yeah, we just told her that there's chlorine in the pool, so like she's gonna get sick. Oh fuck! Oh, yo, she's leaving. She's leaving. Someone told her it was 2 hours and 45 minutes with 2 intermissions, and she said, "I can't do that today." And she left. And so then she left, and there were 6 seats just wasted. And I was like, "Well, can she come back tomorrow when she's feeling better?" And they were like, "She's going back to Europe." And I was like, "So she's never gonna see my plays?" And so I thought she was gonna say hello to me, but she went chasing pavements. That was a joke I wanted to tweet yesterday, but I didn't.
Great pun.
But yeah.
Love that song. Wow. Okay. Well, we're gonna get her to go and sit through the entire thing. If it's the last thing we do, you guys. In terms of adaptation, so Jessica, you've got. You had a book, Luckiest Girl Alive, and you adapted it for the screen. And this does not happen almost ever. I've known so many writers, and they are rarely chosen to adapt their primary analog IP, intellectual property, for the screen. Kind of doesn't really make sense when you think about it at all. But you did, and this movie is coming out with Mila Kunis, and you spent, I think it was this past summer, on set mostly in Toronto, I think a little bit in New York. Did you have to, we had spoken about this, so I think you just said, look, it's part of the deal. I'm adapting it or it's not happening. But how big of a struggle was that? And how did you make it happen? Because it really does not happen a lot.
Yeah, I was not chosen to do it. I really, really wanted to do it. And at the time, this was probably like a year before the book came out. So it was 2014. So it was just the manuscript version, and it had gone to Reese Witherspoon, and she had just started her production company, and they were producing Gone Girl, and she was producing and starring in Wild. And so they were looking for dynamic female, driven stories and content. And she loved it and wanted to do it. And I was very much a newbie, and my book hadn't even come out yet, so I didn't have like a lot of power or sway. And I was very timid to say I would love to be the one to adapt it myself. And there was some discussion about pairing me with a more seasoned screenwriter. And I was like, sure, I hate that idea, but like, sure, if that's what it takes, like we can do that. And what ended up happening, and then the amazing Bruna Papandrea, who has, stuck by this project for the last 7 years, I had a very frank conversation with her where I just said, I just desperately want to do this. And I remember she kind of sighed and was like, okay, because like I knew that she knew it was going to be a lot of work, but I knew that she wasn't going to say no to me. Like, she heard my passion. And what ended up working out in my benefit was that I was a cheap hire because I didn't have a quote. And so initially they wanted this really kind of high profile screenwriter to adapt it. And she asked for $1 million, and the studio said, absolutely not. And the deal fell apart at the 11th hour. And my agent, Michelle Weiner, who she really made this happen. She stepped in and said, just as a reminder, Jessica is really interested in writing this, and she won't cost a lot of money, which is like not something agents are supposed to do. But she knew that was like the only way they were, would even consider me. So the studio essentially said, like, sure, let's give her a shot. And, we can hire a second writer if it doesn't work out. But it did work out because I did a really good job. And thank you. And yeah, that was the story of how it came to be. I mean, literally hundreds of drafts later, we got this movie made. So.
Yeah. We had briefly, we were talking about, like 10, 15 years ago, 120 pages was kind of the standard for screenwriting. It's now, I think, like 90. And hey, if you can get it to 82, that's even, better. Is that like a source of frustration for anybody? I mean, a lot of you are, you're young, so maybe you were born after the 120 page era of screenwriting, but in all sincerity, I mean, you've got, you had a book that was also personal, told a very personal story, and now you have to kind of whittle it down, take the most important parts. You have to kill your darlings, and you have to cram it into like this short space. Is that, we rarely talk about, very rarely, like there's freedom in screenwriting. Like there's not a lot of freedom necessarily. So how do you, I'm just curious, we can go to Zach first and just kind of, is it ever just constrictive?
Yes. I was not aware that scripts are getting shorter. I mean,
oh yeah,
I'm working on. I've been writing the next Creed movie, and that has been like right now that script is 116 pages. But then I get a call every week from the producer being like, "We're gonna just remember we have to cut 10 pages."
Because every page is money.
Like, it's money, but then that's that's a tenth of the movie.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, I traditionally, like when I write my first draft, I just shoot for 120, and I don't really think too much about it. But then, I mean, these are King Richard and Creed are the first things I've had that have been or will be made. But it definitely becomes problematic as you start to move forward into production, and you're just there's little flourishes that you had in there. You're like, I love this, I love the end beat that I put in the scene because the read is beautiful. And then at the end of the day, you're just deleting all that stuff, and it's kind of painful. But personally, I like long movies.
Yeah.
I want to write like JFK,
Yeah. No, I think everybody does. And some people are able to. It's different rules for different, people.
I think that we
That's
should
a good
look at
point.
who gets to write those movies because I
Yes.
think it's fucking bullshit. I deeply do. Mainly because I'm a structure person. Like, I love structure. And structurally, Zola works because it's 85 minutes. Like, that is a great, like, timeline for a comedy. But if you're going to ask me to write something that, like, you have epic scope for, because, like, now everyone's always like, what if it's, like, Gone with the Wind meets, like, Dune or something? And you're like, okay, cool. Like, those are both, like, 4-hour movies. They're like, yeah, but it can only be 95 pages. You're like, are you fucking stupid? Like, do you not understand the structures that you're like inviting us to engage with, and like the form that we're all, because we're all like we're actually like literary artists as well, and I think that people forget that because it's such a commerce-based industry. But like, I don't like to be invited into a space and told, like, I was literally told on one draft of a script I wrote that was 125 pages, bring this back when it's 95 because no one's going to read 125 pages. I was like, well, I wrote them, so someone's going to need to. Like, but I was also young then, so I could only say that in my head. I couldn't say that out loud.
Yeah.
Now I say it out loud, and it's still this thing that like gets makes me frustrated because like Denis Villeneuve made a 4-hour movie just now, and no one gave a fuck. And like, I'm like, I'm confused, and like,
Yeah.
because I think it's a lot of the men.
Anyone else? I mean, Randy or
I'm honestly, I don't concern myself with the page count. My thing is, as long as I can articulate to the producers or the studio execs why every word is on there and why every page is there, I won't concern myself. Usually, a red flag for me is if you tell me to cut something just because of page length rather than story. So like that. So for me, I don't honestly concern myself with it. I literally just get the best story out. And obviously, you want to write it tight and concise, but at the same time, if it's on the page, my belief is if any writer has put something on the page, investigate why. And I feel like as long as you're investigating, then we can have a dialogue about page count. But if it's just because you're trying to hit a quota, I don't honestly entertain it personally.
It's funny because I think, like, for me, like, having the TV background, you're always restricted by time. And so I think having that kind of, that like constriction in your head, I always tend to write quite tight and then realize that I have actually room to let the thing breathe and then expand the thing. But I think the efficiency of just like for each scene, just like getting in and getting out is very much that's the cadence of, I think, how I kind of approach something. and then go back and go like, okay, what can we fill out? What needs more room to breathe? You know, what's interesting here? And I find that gives me less anxiety than trying to bring something back down. But I also agree with Andy as well. It's also like, if you're not, so long as the thing's interesting, so long as the page is telling, like, no one really cares how long the thing is. I think that you can, like, if you keep it engaging, then like you can get a lot of grace from the reader about a page count.
I feel like I've seen some movies that are much too long, and I just think it's interesting what you said about who gets to make those movies, and I won't name names. And I think I'm actually all about keeping things much tighter and much shorter now. Like, this is like, I've noticed this over the last year, and especially in the making of the movie, of understanding like the beauty in like being able to like hit your mark in like a couple of lines. Like, I just think that is such a skill, and I'm working really hard to craft that. And I just have this like kind of competitive nature to me where I'm like, I don't have to make like a long drawn out movie and, you know, to make an impact. Like, I'm going to do it better than like these guys who have been doing it for like years and years, and now they're just like putting out like 3.5-hour movies. Like, I'm going to make my movie 90 minutes and it's going to be amazing. You know, like that's what I'm striving for right now. But
Are any of you, do you have, you know, I'm curious if any of you have kind of like side projects, they haven't been bought, they're maybe not even anything you necessarily need to sell, but they're just purely works that you're doing for yourself. Maybe it's poetry, maybe it's a short story, maybe it's a magazine article, maybe it's a, you know, whatever it might be. But does anyone have anything that they're just like, I'm good if this never sees a light of day, but it's helping me to exercise that writing muscle? This person does up there.
Well, mine now is something that someone did have, and it was about the story of my childhood. It's called Coming of Age, and during COVID happened. I'm processing like my 12-year-old year, the hardest year of my life, and I'm also like processing the fact that I'm worried that every Black person I know might die of COVID. And they were like, "You're taking too long. Like, hurry it up. Like, what's happening?" And I was like, "You can have this $100,000 back. Like, I'm not interested in that dynamic because this is literally my life, and I don't know that you need to rush it." And like, in like taking it back and owning it, I realized part of the reason that was taking me so long to write this movie is because like it was the second movie of 3, right? Like, I was like, oh shit. Like, if I had the time and space to think about this, I would have realized I had to write my mom's story before I could write my story, so I could write this third movie. So that's the thing that's giving me a lot of joy right now, is secretly working on this thing that like is about Martinsville, Virginia, and like maybe no one will actually care about because it's too much about trauma and childhood, but it's mine, you know?
Do you guys, like, along that same vein, do you guys have projects that just like, when you get, you know, I have a very good friend who is an Oscar-nominated screenwriter, and she's got a script that she wrote that is still her favorite script. She's written many scripts that have been made since then. But when she gets the chance, she says she's going to go back and make this independently. Like, whenever she's at that point, she almost is, she can just kind of make it. Do you guys have projects that, like, nobody bought, nobody wanted to read, nobody cared about, but, like, that you just can't wait when the time is right? You're going to be like, look, I'm making this, and I get to just greenlight it. And, you know, do you guys have anything like that where when the moment arises, you're going to just hit go on that?
Every script that I wrote before.
Yeah.
But I have something that's like very personal that I've not written, and I can't figure out how to write it. So I think that's the one that I always like go back to, and like, I'm gonna write this one day, and I have not been able to crack it. So.
Cool. In terms of anyone else before?
I find scripts right now to be, you said vomit draft last night, so I'm going to steal it. I wrote a vomit draft of something last year when I had, like, my third book was with my editor, and I was waiting for her to get me notes, and I didn't have notes for any of my other screen projects that I was working on. And I just had this idea kicking around my head, and I was like, I'm going to see what I can get done. And I wrote this vomit draft in like 10 days, and I love it. And it was so cathartic for me to write, because when I wrote Luckiest Girl Alive, I think part of why it connected with readers the way it did is because I had no sense of what the life of that book would be and what the life of that character and story would be. So I felt this complete freedom to just tell the story the way I wanted to tell it. And now I have to it's hard for me to write my books because I know people are going to read them, and it messes with me creatively. So now that I know the development process, I'm like, I can write any script I want because it's never gonna get made. Like, that's what it feels like. Yeah. Even when you sell it, you're like, it's still not gonna get made. It's just gonna languish in development for years and years. So I can like write about these people who are annoying me so much and like just be really real and honest about it, and it doesn't matter. I don't have to worry about them getting mad at me because it's never gonna get made. So I don't know. That's the thing that like privately brings me joy.
So it's a cathartic exercise.
Yes. Yeah.
That is fascinating.
It's so true that it's like a depressing facet of what we do, but also I think it's different from TV, where if you're on a staff, you know that episode's going to be shot and you know when, and you know how many days you're going to spend on whatever. But for us, it's also abstract and out of reach most of the time. That at least for me, it forces me to make sure that I'm, as much as I can, enjoying the process of creating the thing. And like you were saying, the sort of literary value of these scripts that often just exist as a PDF on various people's computers and never see the light of day, there's still something inherently good about that. And that is an ethereal but a real piece of literature. And because you can never count on it, you kind of have to get some satisfaction out of that.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting, because I think like one of the galvanizing, like forces and the passion behind being a writer is that somebody reads your stuff, that it is out there in the universe. But what I'm hearing is that sometimes you're fine if it's not. As long as
careful what you wish for. Like it's like you want it to connect with people and you want people to read it, but then there's the dark side to that too. Yeah. So I don't know. Cool.
We have one more minute. Okay, I want to hear like really shortly, who is your artistic inspiration? We'll start with Zach and we'll just go down. Could be a writer, director, author, playwright, someone you know in real life. Who's your muse?
I probably changes all the time. I'd say the first person Go, skip me. I'll come back.
Okay, we're going to start with Randy.
It's my son. All of my ideas, I started to realize, even studio films, I started to find a through line. And I was like, oh, it's either centered between fatherhood, it's either centered between a connection between where my son, from a parent standpoint of lineage, every single element. So I always say he's like my creative exec, because like every pitch that I have goes through him. I pitch it because he's 9 years old, by the way. And it's like, because I was like, oh, if he can understand it and I can translate it to an executive, you know what I mean? So it was like, no, it just, it just does. It makes it, I can articulate it very clear, like this is what the movie is. And I know you get it because my 9-year-old son gets it. So he's my inspiration.
That's amazing. And I just want your necklace again. I can't get over it. It's his son and his necklace. Amazing. Jessica, how about you?
Gillian Flynn. So I was working as a writer and editor at Cosmopolitan magazine in 2008, just out of college, and I worked. We would do a small fiction roundup at the back of the magazine, and I was in charge of selecting those books. And so I was constantly being sent advance copies of novels from various publishing houses. And this book, Dark Places, landed on my desk on a Friday afternoon, and I read the first couple pages, and I was like, ooh, this is interesting. Like, I love this voice. And I went home and I devoured it in a weekend, and I just that's her second book, and I think it's kind of her lesser known one, because I guess it did get made, but it kind of didn't have the same impact as Gone Girl. But it was the first thing I read where I was like, it made me want to write something of my own. And I think it's so important to find that voice that you connect to, that like it's someone who, like, even philosophically, I think sees the world the way I do, and it made me feel like I could do this too. So
cool. Awesome. Jeremy?
So I think that it's sort of a weird collective of people, or like constantly who I'm pulling from, and so it's like, it's my group of playwriting friends who are in like a weird writers group with me that like I'm constantly emailing and like constantly shouting out, and so excited to see do amazing stuff. It's Sam Levinson, who has been like my best friend for 10 years, and it's Janixa, who like taught me literally everything about how to make a movie and treated me like an apprentice director or something when we were co-writing together. And then it's also like someone like Carol Churchill or Adrian Kennedy, who like I'm really good friends with, who are like, older like playwrights who are never have shied away from being complex, never have feared that like they weren't legible. Like their legibility is in their like sort of their commitment to their work, and I want to like hold that dear. So like in my office, there's like a photograph of Adrian Kennedy and a photograph of Carol Churchill like right on my desk, so I can like constantly pull from those ladies. And also, speaking of the thing you were talking about, like being concise and being like I don't need to like have like 4 hours to show off. Like Carol is the best at that. She has a play in London right now that's 10 minutes. That's the best play.
Oh my God, I love
it's
that.
genius, and like she's been doing this practice of only writing like tiny plays for a long time. She's my
So
everything.
great. It's amazing. Julia.
In terms of screenwriters, it does change all the time. I guess I'm always drawn to like writer directors, I guess, and playwrights, and like Jane Campion, Kenneth Lonergan, like people who have really piercing observations and are just great artists. And I get inspired by books too. I mean, everyone from like Laurie Moore to Zadie Smith, fiction writers who just have that ability to see the kind of piercing like poetry in everyday life.
Generally, I'm very, very fortunate in that I have a lot of friends who are writers, and that they are also very good writers, and that we're able to share work with each other. And it is like being able to read very talented friends' drafts, they're just sometimes like I'll read one of my friends' scripts and I'm like, this is so good, I actually want to vomit. Like it's so like it's just so beautiful. And I think that for me is that's the thing that kind of really kind of keeps me going and keeps inspiring me. And also just to be able to like feed off each other and to be able to like to critique each other, but in a way that is from a place of such like love and support. I just think there's no better way of kind of feeling that.
Last but not least, Zach.
I feel like I should say my kids because Randy did, but
Yeah.
probably not. I was thinking, I remember seeing Badlands.
Badlands? Is that-
Badlands. It was like one individual had a voice and
Yeah.
made this. And so I think that was, I don't like go back to that as a writing example, but I remember feeling like, oh, there's like an individual at the heart of this.
Have you ever been to the Badlands National Park?
I've never been.
You gotta go. It's incredible. So, that's it. That's all we have time for. You guys are amazing, and you're all gonna do amazing things. Thank you.